I was watching an interview with Richard Dawkins the other day by Trigonometry, which is a quite a well-known podcast and run by a couple of guys. Perhaps the main guy on it is Konstantin Kisin, who's quite fierce in his interviewing, or at least he can be. Anyway, he was interviewing Richard Dawkins, and kind of inevitably, I suppose, he was asking him about consciousness. Now, Richard Dawkins, the well-known geneticist, ex-professor for the public of understanding of science at Oxford, who also suggested once that we shouldn't tell fairy stories to children. We should only teach them things that are true, like geology, because that's much more interesting. Anyway, he believes that we are deterministic. We are just a bunch of chemicals that is predictable because of its reactions. And Konstantin Kisin goes, okay, you believe that, but your experience is that we have free will, that we are not determined. Yeah? If someone does something to you, we assume it's because they chose to. And if we do things, it's because we have the experience of choosing to do so. And Richard Dawkins says, yes, that's true. And Kisin goes, well, there's a contradiction there, a huge contradiction in what you fundamentally believe to be the case about the universe and in what you fundamentally experience about your life. This is a huge contradiction. And Dawkins goes, yes. And as though, yes, it's interesting, isn't it? But, and Kisin was pressing him on it, but he said, well, it's not really my subject. You should go and ask a philosopher. So this contradiction didn't matter to Dawkins. Whereas, of course, to many of us, it really matters. You know, if we believe one thing and our experiences of something else, that's huge. There's a contradiction there. There's maybe even hypocrisy there. It's a really interesting subject to consider. It needs some kind of resolution. But the thing about Dawkins, and it's true of a lot of scientists, they think consciousness is just a sort of sideshow which is a bit awkward and we'll leave it to someone else to sort out because they're fundamentally extroverted. They view the universe as this box of things to be investigated, and because they think that is what is real, that is why they can be part of the reason they can be so interested in it and make the discoveries, because they can often be original people who make great discoveries, and yet metaphysically they can be very naive. Einstein seems to be been a bit of an exception there. And Bohr. In fact, a lot of the quantum physicists, even though Einstein wasn't really a quantum physicist, they seem to have more metaphysical subtlety. Maybe it's because they were closer to when Christianity was still around. I don't know. I've never really thought of that maybe scientists have become more literalistic as time goes on. So that was interesting. And if you look at Richard Dawkins' chart, well, you look to Jupiter for beliefs, and his Jupiter is in Taurus. So he believes in Taurus, the natural world. That is his area of speciality. He knows all about zoology. Yeah. He knows all about animals and their evolution. So that's where his beliefs are. It's very grounded and it's in nature. And yet, here's the thing. We don't know his birth time. He was born in Nairobi. So if we do a midday chart, yeah, we can still use the planets. He's got Sun in Aries, which is his sort of... Well, the thing about Aries is that they don't, as one Aries said to me, he always seemed to be arguing. He goes, I'm not actually arguing or debating. It's that I see the truth and the other person needs to be converted to the truth. That is how Aries argue. And that is what has characterized Richard Dawkins, is that, you know, people need to understand that religion is nonsense. It's pure rubbish. It's pure bunkum. So that's Aries for you, yeah? It's not enough live and let live. It's people need to understand, you know, that religion is nonsense. So he's an evangelical atheist. Now, here's the thing. He's got Moon and Venus in Pisces, We don't know the exact degree of the moon because it moves a lot during the day. Venus doesn't move much. It's in Pisces, and Venus is opposite Neptune. Yeah. So we've got quite a different story. Venus and Neptune, both in Pisces, with Venus opposite Neptune. I mean, that's a hell of a dose of Neptunian Piscean energy, because Neptune, of course, rules Pisces. And that is about Pisces. It's connected to the bigger picture. It's connected to the spirit, the soul of the universe. It feels the soul of the universe. And Neptune, if you like, is a direct hotline to God, or however you frame it. Now, Richard Dawkins has described himself as a cultural Christian. And he's elaborated a bit on that. And one of he says, well, he loves all the hymns and the rituals and everything like that. And he says in the shower, he will hum the hymns to himself. Yeah. So that feeling in him that actually loves the expressions of Christianity, that is his Pisces. And in that feeling is his religion. Yeah. It's that connection to tradition and to beauty. That's good enough for me. Intellectually, he's something else. And there is a kind of split there almost. And his Mercury is also in Pisces, but it's unaspected. It doesn't join up with the rest of the chart. So it's almost like he can think one thing and feel another. And he's happy like that because he doesn't have to make them join up. As we saw in that interview, he believes one thing and he experiences another. It's not a problem for him. He doesn't really think philosophically, but he has his connection to religion. And you can see from the chart that it's deep. And atheism is almost a religion for him. So interesting sort of contemplation around the man. But there is this idea of fate and free will for us still left to consider. And it's an ancient conundrum. Before the universe was ever deemed to be deterministic. But the thing is, we view fate as something written in stone. Whereas for the ancient Greeks, fate was living. And for the ancient Norse, they both had these three women, the Moirai in Greece, and the Norns, who sat beneath Yggdrasil, the world tree in Norse mythology. And they spun fate. Yeah. The Moirai, they'd sort of measure it and cut it and allot it and all these things. Your life was kind of written for you before you lived it. And we do get that impression sometimes, don't we? After all these years, something happens and you realise that was meant to happen. It was all leading up to this. And yet, you made the decisions along the way. And that fate is not... So that was fate. This was always going to happen. But it's a living fate. It's not hammered into the ground in the way that we think of it these days. I mean, of course, quantum physics, that upsets the fate idea, doesn't it? It makes things much more malleable. Things happen because of probability. So it comes in another way. Well, rather, the free will element came in to this rigid fate. Yeah, because that's what happens when you make anything rigid. Something will come in that will subvert it. That's the purpose of the trickster archetype. So it's a wonderful sort of contemplation. Of course, we have it in astrology all the time because the chart does say things about us that are useful, that are true, that are alive. We go, how could the universe have known this about me? And yet, if you push it, it breaks down. When we try and make it rigid and scientific, it breaks down, as it should. A trickster comes in. Jung found this. He was an astrologer, much more of an astrologer than he lets on. And he found that there was these sun-moon interactions where there's good relationships, marriages that work well. He thought, great, I found it. Let's do a statistical analysis, all these marriages. And of course, it broke down. It didn't work. And he said it's as if there's a trickster there. And so it does work until you try and pin it down, and then it stops working. So it's interesting, it's mysterious. We can never get to the bottom of this fate-free will argument. Jung put it well when he said that free will is doing gladly that which we have to do. That's a kind of genius comment. It really sums it up. Because there are things we have to do. And if we have any sense, we do them. We choose to do them gladly. You know what's right and wrong within you. You have a conscience that's connected in a way to everything. You know. And you know what you should be doing. What's right to be doing. And sometimes our own ideas and needs and desires get in the way of that. Or our lack of courage gets in the way of that. And things go wrong. And then we eventually get back to being in alignment, to being in balance, as the medicine wheel puts it. To not sinning, as Christianity might put it. Because sin means originally to miss the mark. It's not this big judgment thing. It's about missing the mark. And going for the mark is knowing what we have to do and doing it. So that's not sinning. So there you go. There's this contemplation. There is this sense of, there is this kind of plan for our life, but it's not rigid. And it is kind of meant, yeah? But we also have to make the choices and we have to do things along the way. And that fate element, it keys us into that deeper mystery and enchantment. Yeah? Because if you've just got fate alone in this rigid way, that kills everything. And that's modern science. And if you've just got free will, you've just got the lone, separate individual. And that kills everything as well. Because that's what we've got nowadays. We've got a philosophy of fate, a rigid fate of science, yeah? Everything is predetermined. And then, but politically and culturally, we've got the autonomy of the individual and all his rights and everything like that. They're separate and they're opposites. They're contradictory. But we can bring them together. We need to bring fate and free will together. And they bring in the magic. Because they're both true. They're kind of contradictory, but only from the point of view of our limited consciousness. They key us into that great mystery, that contradiction that Richard Dawkins wasn't interested in exploring.